Technology Manager, Mr. Jason Ramos.
Hi, hi, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for, first of all, thank you for braving the Friday traffic. Despite the rains, we are having a very good number of attendees. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Um, Before I start, I first want to acknowledge a few people that will be gracing us tonight with their presence. First of all, is the Honorable Virgit Buena, R&D. She is the chairman of she is the chairman of the Board of Nutrition and Dietetics of the Philippines. Next would be Dr. Nigel Abraham, our scientific director from Cambridge Nutritional Sciences. They flew in last night. Okay? And Our friends from the media, thank you for being here. Uh, the Life Science Center for Wellness and Health team, thank you for your support. And most of all, I'd like to acknowledge our directors, Miss Chris and Miss Marv Romero Salas. Thank you. Um, okay. So, last night, our very able PR team emailed me a two-page speech. Okay, and while I was going through it, I said, kawawa naman yung mga makikinig kung masyadong technical yung sasabihin ko sa kanila. Kasi Friday, and I'm so sure that everyone is hungry and tired from the traffic. So instead, I'll opt to tell you the story of how Asknd came about. Our company, Global Medical Technologies, or GMT for short, started out as a medical distribution company specializing in FIT, or food intolerance testing. When we started, there were a lot of pushbacks and roadblocks that we experienced from both doctors and nutritionists and patients. Okay? And despite the initial disbelief, we worked very hard in educating our stakeholders. We worked hard in proving medical cases. We worked hard in educating allergologists, dermatologists, and essentially everyone that we want to tap. Okay? Slowly but surely, people's success stories started to come out. Okay? People who suffered from chronic symptoms felt tremendous improvements from their symptoms when they implemented FIT-guided elimination diets. With that, we gained confidence and a strong desire to further improve our products and services. So we hired nutritionists and had them trained by our principals from the UK, which is Cambridge Nutritional Sciences. And the rest, as they say, is history. FIT, or food intolerance testing, is now established here in the Philippines. So from that initial ordeal, these are what we learned. Number one, proper personalized nutrition is essential for health. We can't generalize nutrition because everyone is biologically unique. Okay? We learned that the hard way, but at least now we know. And yeah, my boss is laughing. Number two, everyone deserves to be properly informed. In today's day and age, this is a big challenge because of Google. Okay? Because there's so much bad information circulating in the internet. And it's really a big problem. Number three, ideas become effective when people participate. When people suspend disbelief and try to see with open eyes, that's where opportunity for innovation lies. And that is where progress can happen. So the great idea behind Asknd. First of all, we wanted it to become a platform to speed the spread of correct information on nutrition. Next, we want to spread the success stories that can inform, inspire, and motivate people to adapt that mindset. Next, we want to engage experts, institutions, and individuals towards a common goal of making people healthy through proper nutrition education. Last but most important, we want Asknd to become our advocacy. First, for everyone to look at nutrition with utmost importance. Second, to empower and uplift the nutritionist dietitian's practice so they can help more people by having the right information and tools. And lastly, to promote sustainable collaboration among scientists, doctors, nutritionists, dietitians, chefs, restaurant owners, farmers, and especially the public. Tonight symbolizes our first step towards that forward direction. And we want to pave the way for this movement to gain momentum. But we need your help, each and every one of you. We cannot do this by ourselves. And that's why we reached out to each and every one of you in this room. Whether you're a scientist, a doctor, a nutritionist dietitian, a food producer, or a member of the media. We invite you to join us. To help spread this consciousness so we can all use something as simple yet as powerful as food to enjoy a healthy and productive life. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome and have an awesome evening.
Thank you, Mr. Jason Ramos, for that wonderful speech. And now let me introduce to you our host for this evening, Ms. Rosilla Bailon.
Hello. Nabitin. Hello everyone. Good evening. So before I formally open before we continue with the celebration, I know dahil sa traffic and sa ulan, everyone is hungry na, right? Yes, I know. Yes. So before that, we'll be starting muna with the dinner. I'm very much honored to host this event tonight because tonight's event actually supports my personal advocacy as a nutritionist dietitian. So let me share to you a short personal story. 10 years ago, I lost my mother to colon cancer. So we went to the doctor. Looking at the timeline, she was diagnosed with cancer around October of 2015, and she passed away. I'm sorry, October of 2005. See if bad memory ay alalahanin. And she passed away February of 2006. So if you count it, less than 6 months. And everyone in the family was very much hopeful with the chemotherapy. We are actually at the last dose of her chemotherapy because I think, as I can remember, there were 6 phases of chemotherapy. Her chemotherapy was on a Saturday, and the day after she passed away. So looking back, actually my research happened right after. Um, I was only 15 years old back then. So I was in high school and I remember my schoolmates, because my mother is a school nurse. So my teachers were telling me, oh, malignant daw yun sa mommy mo. But before coming to school, my mother was telling me, malignant is just, ano lang anak, mild lang, wala lang yan, kaya to ni mommy. So I was like, no, malignant is okay lang. Small lang daw yun. That is, kumbaga, kung paano ina-explain na benign, yun yung pag-explain sa akin ng mother ko. So I was really hopeful. She was even telling me stories that after 20 years, I'll see you in college, blah, 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 and so on. So everyone was really much hopeful. And when I was doing my research, I was like, bakit ganun? Bakit, why even if she had undergone the chemotherapy, we bought all the expensive medicines and even the food supplements, everything, everything was thrown into the trash. So when I was doing my research, I read that Hodgkin's lymphoma and colon cancer is kumbaga dead end na. Right? My mother was stage 2B, and if it has letters na daw, other organs are already damaged also. Kasi kapag stage 2 na walang letters, kumbaga as a first stage pa yun. First phase, rather. Okay, so as I was doing my research, I read diet, stress, and genes. With the stress, my mother is a happy person. And then kami lagi, everyone was close in the family. So, nagkakakwentuhan. So the stress level was not that high. Genes, no one is in the family had cancer. Okay? So, I tracked down diet. Sabi ko, had I known that diet was the main cause, siguro naagapan pa si mommy. And think everything was God-given actually. I was browsing the courses in UST and I saw nutrition and dietetics. I love cooking actually. So
symptoms are very varied. They are potentially affecting all body systems, all organs of the body may be affected. And this is why a lot of doctors don't like this type of testing, because most diseases which can affect lots of different parts of the body are often regarded as not real diseases. They're often regarded as people somehow in their head. And reactions to our food up into those which involve the immune system and those which don't involve the immune system. So non-immune mediated are things like enzyme deficiencies. So lactose intolerance is probably the best example. The individual lacks or doesn't have enough of the lactase enzyme, so the ingestion of dairy products will cause a GI type symptom. Histamine intolerance is another example. We eat histamine with the food that we eat. If you don't have the right enzymes to break that down, that can be a problem. And this is normally referred to as food intolerance, as a non-immune related problem. On the immune side, we have a special type of antibody, IgE antibodies. These are our classical allergies. So a child who is severely allergic to peanuts will have IgE antibodies to peanut. IgG is a difficult one because IgG is an antibody, so it's the immune system, so it is technically an allergy. It is actually a type 3 allergy, as we'll see in a moment. But it's very confusing to be calling IgG responses allergy, because then people think they are like the classical type of allergy, and they're very, very different. So we try to actually avoid using the word allergy, and we end up calling it intolerance. So we're talking about intolerance today, and we're talking about intolerance a lot, but technically speaking, IgG is actually an allergy, but we will stick with intolerance for the rest of the talk. Food sensitivity is probably a better term, because then this doesn't confuse with allergy. It keeps the allergy societies happy, and it isn't really an intolerance. But food sensitivity is probably a better term. And the other thing we need to identify is that way back in 1963, Gerald Coombs, which is our classic textbook immunology, talked about 4 specific types of hypersensitivity reaction. So what we have is that type 1, type 4 to some degree, but type 1 is our classical IgE allergies, and type 3 is our IgG allergy intolerance sensitivities. And the other difference with intolerances is that they can affect anybody at any time. Allergies are largely genetically inherited, so the incidence of true food allergy is probably no more than 5%. But where a food intolerance is concerned, these are environmental. These are the product of what we've been doing to ourselves over our lifetime. So theoretically, any one of us here can develop a food intolerance at any time. So a little bit more about antibodies, just to set the scene. There are 5 types of antibody. IgE antibodies are our classical allergy. And what IgE does is it has a very specific type of reaction. IgE antibodies are on the surface of these immune cells called mast cells and basophils, and those antibodies are specific to whatever we're allergic to. And when that allergen comes in contact with those antibodies, this triggers these cells to burst open. It's called explosive degranulation, and they release a whole range of very nasty, powerful chemicals, things like histamine. And it's these chemical mediators that actually cause the classical effects of allergy, itching, swelling, mucus production, are all caused by these chemicals. IgG, on the other hand, works in a very different way. What IgG tends to do is to cause the development of these things, called immune complexes. So what we have here is we have an IgG antibody to a particular food, and the food is at the core of those antibodies, and those are associated with food intolerance. And the key thing here is it drives inflammation. So what we're seeing now is IgG antibodies to the food that we're eating, activating complement and producing low-grade inflammation. Dietary elimination therapy based on the presence of IgG antibodies to the foods that we're eating. And this dietary therapy may be effective in reducing low-grade inflammation and thereby preventing clinical quantities like type 2 diabetes and atherosclerosis. Now, type 2 diabetes alone in the UK is now considered to be something like 80% of the UK health budget is going to go to treating the consequences of type 2 diabetes. If we can actually make a case that we can help prevent that in the first place by looking at the food that we're eating and identifying the best foods for us, or most importantly, identifying the foods that we shouldn't be eating, isn't that a huge, massive thing? But getting this message, of course, is what we're all about here this evening, is to try to drive that message. I threw in a few slides actually just to point out from the sort of wellness side is that one other thing about athletic performance and optimal performance is that inflammation is bad for that as well. It's a very energy sapping process, and it's going to lead to reduction in performance. It will lead to reduction in recovery from damage and illness. So not only are we looking at potentially severe chronic diseases, but also health, lifestyle, optimal performance. And this is one of the only studies I've seen looking at weight and the quality of life, which is performed by the University of Miami. They again showed that identifying the IgG foods, removing them from the diet, we were looking at weight loss, lower blood pressure, BMI reduction, and improvement indicators of quality of life as well, including mental. People had less brain fog, they felt more alert. Research papers, well, we could spend the rest of the evening talking about the amount of publications on IgG, so very quickly we'll just highlight some of the most important ones. It's often referred to as delayed food allergy because intolerances are delayed. They're reactions to foods that we've eaten over the last 3, 4, 5 days sometimes. So when we're sitting there trying to work out what is it that's caused my symptoms, it's almost impossible because it could be anything you've eaten over the last week. This particular paper here is a very good paper. It was an allergy clinic that found more and more patients were testing negative for allergies but clearly had allergic-like symptoms to the food that they were eating. So they started doing IgG testing and they produced a whole range of symptoms and a whole range of symptoms that could be fixed by doing this type of testing. Irritable bowel syndrome, there have been several really good studies now looking at the relationship between food IgG antibodies and irritable bowel. We've already talked about inflammation, obesity, things like arthritis, migraine. I was slightly sceptical of migraine as an immunologist, I had to say. People always talk about they know what their food triggers are, and most neurologists don't really believe that, and they've all thought that was not really true. The last two studies in particular have been very, very convincing that using IgG testing, find the foods which are the main triggers and remove them, you reduce the incidence of migraine and reduce the severity of migraine. Asthma and respiratory disease, again, asthma is regarded as an allergic condition, and yet these patients all responded to removing IgG positive foods. Crohn's disease, inflammatory bowel diseases, most inflammatory bowel diseases can be made worse by certain foods. It's not the cause and it's not the treatment, but it certainly helps to make the condition worse. And then there's strange things like schizophrenia, autism, how these strange psychological conditions are associated with the food that we're actually eating. The delayed allergy one, again, something like 71% of patients achieved 75% or greater improvement level. These patients who were attending this clinic had gone through every other form of treatment and had found no success in other ways. So doing IgG-based was finding the answer to their problems. And we probably can't see that, but the list of symptoms which can be cured is very large and very varied. So you can't say it is test for certain things, it can be test for just about any symptom. Migraine. This paper was pointing out that there is a link between IgG and migraine and IgG and obesity and inflammation. These are all have the same problem at the core, and a lot of obese people suffer from chronic migraines. And similarly, we see that a lot of patients with IBS suffer from migraines because they all have the same inflammation, increased permeability, IgG antibodies, and they're all being triggered by the food that we're eating. Current medical opinion, well, the best example I think was this paper, which was last year. This was a review in the World Journal of Gastroenterology, and what they did is they reviewed every single publication to do with IgG, intolerance, gut, since 1966. And what they said is that there is strong evidence that IBS is associated with food reactions, it's associated with inflamed or leaky gut, and that hypersensitivity reactions may well be playing a role in IBS. Now, we know this, we've proved this, we've talked about it, but this is a mainstream journal that's finally accepting that there does seem to be a role for it. And they went on to say that gut permeability to food allergies is probably selective, it's part of the cause, and that increased food IgG titers are a specific reaction to the food that we're eating in an abnormal way and not just a normal background level, which a lot of allergists keep insisting that that's all it means. So we have a very good paper that is saying that, like all science, we need to do more, we need more studies, we need more evidence, but what we do have is enough good, sound evidence that we should start thinking about this type of testing as part of mainstream testing. Where IBS is concerned, these are some of the slides I've used previously, but an interesting fact about IBS is that after 8 years, 88% of people who were diagnosed with IBS still have the same symptoms under the NHS acute care model. And after 7 years, 98% of them have no change in their diagnosis. So you're going to your doctor, you end up with a diagnosis of IBS, which is a disease by exclusion. IBS doesn't really exist. IBS is there are many forms of IBS. So one thing we have to do is that food intolerances, IgGs, are one form, but we also have to look at parasites. In a clinic I work with in the UK, 22% of patients who have been diagnosed as having irritable bowel syndrome all have the presence of blastocystis in their guts. Dysbiosis, pathogenic bacteria, pancreatic insufficiencies, digestion problems can all cause symptoms that are diagnosed as IBS. But certainly intolerances are part of that workup. So what we've always been saying is that if you take your IBS patient and do the right tests, find out what the cause is, you can treat probably 8 out of 10 cases for IBS, which currently is virtually no treatment. So how do we fix the gut environment? How do we make it more healthy? Which is one thing I was asked to talk about. So fecal transplants is a good thing to talk about while we've still got food in front of us and we've just eaten. There's a small story that was published in New Scientist. There was a gastroenterologist in Australia, Thomas Baroni, and he was asked to look at a patient who was suffering from Parkinson's disease, but the patient also suffered from severe and chronic constipation. So he treated him with antibiotics because he had some pathogenic bacteria. He then treated with probiotics to try to fix that. And he managed to sort the GI tract out. He didn't have constipation. But at the same time, the neurologist said, what have you done to our patient? Because he no longer has any signs of Parkinson's disease. The MRI scans were all clear, and 3 separate neurologists all confirmed that technically he no longer had Parkinson's. So all we had done is manipulate the gut environment, look at the bacteria in the gut, and somehow this had cured his Parkinson's. Now, I thought I was very careful to say I don't know if this is a cure, but in this person's individual case, by looking at the gut flora, he was able to cause that. But what we are seeing is more and more evidence that putting the right bacteria into the gut that has the wrong bacteria can cure a whole wealth of conditions. Now, over the years, we've been relying on probiotics. And probiotics is only a very, very small, narrow part of our gut. Lactobacillus, bifidobacteria are important, but they represent only 2% of the bacteria we have. Fecal transplanting is theoretically a way of taking the gut flora from a healthy donor, transplanting it into our unhealthy, and transferring all the healthy benefits from it. It's been gaining ground a lot. In the US now, you can go to a fecal transplant bank and choose which poo you want to have to be treated with. Seriously, patients have been treated. There's a thing called C. difficile infection, which is now untreatable by antibiotics. And they've had a 98% success rate with treating untreatable pathogenic bacteria by putting the right flora in there. So it is, I wouldn't say the future because it's happening, and we're going to see more and more of what we can do with this, I think. Ulcerative colitis, severe inflammatory bowel diseases can all be potentially treated. Allergies and intolerance, well, maybe. I think we need to see where that will go. This particular paper, just to kind of round off, was looking at testing generally for allergies and intolerance, and it concluded that IgG testing shows promise, it's clinically meaningful, and proven useful as a guide to elimination diets. And further investigation required. I'm sponsoring at least 5 studies presently, and we will continue to drive that, but the evidence really there is sound and there. Oh, thank you for your attention.